I've been carrying my wife's family on my back for 5 years now, and they don't even know it. My name's Aaron, and I married Sophia knowing her family, her mom Judith, her dad Raymond, and her brother Derek. Thought I was some kind of nobody. They've been living easy, thinking it's all because of an inheritance from Judith's late husband. That's what they tell themselves, anyway. The truth is, I'm the one paying for everything. Their mortgage? Me. Their car loans? Me. Those fancy vacations they take every year, the credit card bills that pile up from their shopping sprees. All me. I've been pouring my money into their lives while they look down on me like I'm dirt under their shoes. They call me broke, a loser, someone who doesn't deserve Sophia. Behind my back, they laugh about my old sedan, the one I drive because I don't need to flash cash to feel good about myself. They smirk at my plain clothes, my quiet way of living, thinking I'm some poor sap who lucked into their perfect daughter. I hear it all. The whispers, the jabs, the way they roll their eyes when I walk into a room. Judith with her sharp tongue, Raymond with his smug little nods, Derek with his loud, cocky grin. They've got no idea that every brick of that house they live in, every meal they eat, every trip they brag about, it's all because of me. I've kept my mouth shut, let them believe their little fantasy about the inheritance because I didn't want to rock the boat for Sophia. She loves them, trusts them, and I love her enough to keep the peace. But it's been eating at me, day after day, watching them strut around like they're better than me. I work hard, long hours at a job they'd never understand, pulling in more than they could dream of, and I funnel it straight into their ungrateful hands. My sedan's old because I don't care about showing off. I've got a savings account that could buy their whole neighborhood if I wanted to. My clothes are simple because I don't need designer labels to know who I am. Meanwhile, they're out there living like kings, oblivious to the fact that I'm the one holding it all together. Sometimes I catch Sophia looking at me, her eyes soft and warm, and I wonder if she knows more than she lets on. She's never asked where the money comes from, never questioned why her family's still afloat after all these years. Maybe she doesn't want to know. Maybe she's just happy to see them happy. But me? I'm tired. Tired of the sneers, the backhanded comments, the way they treat me like I'm less than nothing. I sit at their dinner tables sometimes, eating food I paid for, listening to them talk about their big plans, plans I make possible, and it's all I can do not to stand up and tell them the truth. I imagine it sometimes, just laying it all out there. That roof over your heads? My money. That car in your driveway? My money. The wine you're drinking right now? Guess what? Me again. I picture their faces, the shock, the way their mouths would drop open. But I don't say it. Not yet. I keep it locked inside, a quiet fire burning hotter every time they open their mouths. 5 years I've done this. 5 years of being their punching bag while I sign the checks that keep their world spinning. I don't know how much longer I can take it. Sophia's worth it. She's always been worth it. But there's a limit, you know? A man can only swallow so much before he's had enough. And I think I'm getting close to that line. Real close. They don't see me, not really. They see a shadow, a joke, someone to mock when they're sipping their fancy cocktails. But I see them. I see every selfish, clueless move they make. And I'm starting to wonder how long I'll keep playing this game. Maybe it's time they learned who's really holding the cards. Maybe it's time I stopped being their silent provider and started being the man they'll never forget. Last night was the breaking point for me, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I'm Aaron, and I've been putting up with my wife's family treating me like trash for years, but what happened at Judith's house pushed me over the edge. I'd driven over there in my beat-up old sedan, the one they love to make fun of, carrying a bottle of wine I'd picked up on the way. It wasn't anything fancy, just something to show I wasn't showing up empty-handed. I figured it might soften them up a little, keep the peace for Sophia's sake. She'd asked me to come to this family dinner, said it'd be nice to all be together. I didn't want to go, I never do, but I love her, so I said yes. As I walked up to the front door, I could already hear them inside, their voices loud and cheerful, glasses clinking together like they were having the time of their lives. I paused for a second, hand on the doorknob, just listening. That's when I heard it, Judith's voice, sharp and dripping with that smug tone she always uses when she talks about me. Aaron will always be a worthless son-in-law, she said, and I could picture her raising her glass, that fake smile plastered on her face. The room erupted in laughter, and then Derek piped up, his voice loud and cocky like always. I don't know what Sophia sees in him. If she was smarter, she'd have married a man with actual money. More laughs. And then Raymond, quiet, gruff Raymond who usually just sits there, joined in with a low chuckle. Maybe one day he'll save up enough to buy a real car, he said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. Or a suit that doesn't look like it came from a discount bin, Derek added, and they all laughed again, glasses clinking as they toasted to their little joke. My joke. Me. I stood there, frozen, the bottle of wine heavy in my hand, my stomach twisting into knots. They were mocking me, right there in the house I've been paying for, drinking wine I probably funded, eating food I made possible. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, the anger bubbling inside me. But I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. They didn't even flinch when I walked in, just glanced over with those fake smiles, like they hadn't been tearing me apart seconds before. Oh, Aaron, you made it, Judith said, her voice all syrupy and sweet now, like she hadn't just called me worthless. I nodded, forced a smile of my own, and set the wine on the table. Brought this, I said, keeping my tone even. Derek snorted, eyeing the bottle like it was garbage. Thanks, man, but we've got the good stuff already, he said, holding up a glass of something red and expensive, probably something I paid for too. I didn't say anything, just sat down and let them carry on with their night. They talked about their plans, their fancy lives, all the things they think they've earned from this mysterious inheritance they're so proud of. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table, her way of telling me she was glad I was there, and I squeezed back. She didn't hear what they said. She'd been in the kitchen when it happened, but I did. Every word was burned into my head, playing over and over like a song I couldn't shake. I sat there, eating the food, sipping the wine, smiling when they looked my way, but inside I was done. Done with their games, their insults, their blindness. They thought they were so clever, laughing at me while I sat in a house I've kept standing for them. They didn't know I'd heard every word, didn't know that smile on my face was a mask hiding something else. I'd been letting this go on for too long, swallowing their crap because I didn't want to hurt Sophia or stir up trouble. But that toast, that laughter, it was the final insult, the one that broke something in me. As I drove home later, Sophia asleep in the passenger seat, I stared at the road ahead and made up my mind. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. I wasn't going to keep funding their lives while they spit in my face. They thought they were untouchable, living high and mighty on my dime. But they didn't know what was coming. I did. I'd already decided. This was the end of their free ride, and I wasn't going to feel bad about it. Not one bit. After that dinner at Judith's house, I couldn't sleep. I'm Aaron, and I've been holding up my wife's family for years, but what I heard last night, those laughs, those insults, kept me awake, staring at the ceiling. Sophia was snoring softly beside me, her face peaceful, no idea what was spinning through my head. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and sat down at the kitchen table in the dark. It was time to face the truth, to see it all laid out in front of me. I opened up the files I've been keeping, the ones nobody knows about, not even Sophia. I've got records of every penny I've spent on her family, every payment I've made to keep them afloat while they treat me like I'm nothing. I started clicking through the numbers, and the more I saw, the heavier my chest felt. First, there was the mortgage. $112,000 over the last 5 years, all from my account, wired straight to the bank so Judith and Raymond could keep that big, fancy house they love showing off. Then the credit card bills, $78,000 worth of their shopping, their dinners out, their new gadgets, all paid off by me every month so they wouldn't have to worry. Judith's medical expenses popped up next, $35,500 for her treatments, her pills, her doctor visits, because she's always going on about her health but never mentions who's footing the bill. And then the rest, $96,800 in random stuff, from their Caribbean vacations to Derek's car repairs to the organic groceries they insist on buying because they're above regular food. I sat there, staring at the screen, the glow lighting up my face as the numbers added up in my head. Over $300,000, all told. That's what I've poured into them, year after year, while they laugh at my old sedan and my plain shirts. My hands clenched into fists on the table, and I had to take a deep breath to keep from slamming the laptop shut. Sophia's always trusted them, you know? She grew up thinking her family had it all together, that they were taken care of because of her stepdad's inheritance. She never asked questions, never wondered why the money never seemed to run out. I didn't tell her because I didn't want her to feel caught in the middle, me on one side, them on the other. She loves them, and I love her, so I let it go. I let them think I was just some quiet guy who got lucky marrying her. Let them believe their little fairy tale about the inheritance. But sitting there in the dark, those numbers staring back at me, I realized I'd let it go on way too long. I'd been their ATM, their safety net, their invisible lifeline, and they didn't even care enough to see it. They mocked me in a house I paid for, drank wine I bought, toasted to my so-called worthlessness while I sat there smiling like it didn't hurt. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the tiredness sink in, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. How did I let it get this far? I'm not a pushover. At least, I didn't used to be. I work hard, make good money, more than they could ever guess. I've got a head for numbers, a steady job that pays well, and I've been smart with what I earn. I could have been living big, driving a shiny new truck, wearing suits that'd make Derek drool, but I didn't. I chose to live simple, to keep things low-key, because I didn't need all that to feel good about myself. And what did I get for it? A family-in-law that thinks I'm a joke. I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under me, and looked out the window at the quiet street. The anger was still there, simmering, but something else was growing too, resolve. I'd been playing their game, letting them live this lie, but I didn't have to anymore. I didn't know them a damn thing. They'd taken enough, my money, my patience, my pride, and I was done giving. I closed the laptop, the screen going black, and sat there for a minute, just breathing. Sophia trusted them, sure, but she trusted me too. And I wasn't going to let her family keep walking all over me. Not after last night. Not after seeing those numbers. This was my life too, and I was taking it back. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't their silent provider anymore. That part was over. I was still reeling from the numbers I'd crunched last night when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter this morning. I'm Aaron, and I've been secretly bankrolling my wife's family for years, but they think I'm broke, a nobody. After seeing how much I've poured into their lives, over $300,000, I was already on edge, trying to figure out my next move. Sophia was in the shower, humming to herself like everything was normal, while I stood there in our little kitchen, sipping coffee that had gone cold. The buzz caught my attention, and I picked up the phone, expecting maybe a work email or a bill reminder. Instead, it was a notification from a group chat I didn't even know I was in. Luxury Getaway 2025. My stomach dropped as I opened it. There it was, a whole conversation between Judith, Raymond, Derek, and Sophia, planning a family vacation to the Caribbean. Pictures of white sand beaches, crystal clear water, a resort with palm trees and infinity pools. They'd booked it already, dates set for next summer, all excited about sipping cocktails and lounging in the sun. I scrolled through the messages, my jaw tightening with every word. Can't wait to get away, Judith wrote. Gonna be the trip of a lifetime, Derek chimed in. We deserve this, Raymond added, which almost made me laugh out loud considering he barely says 2 words to me most days. Then I saw it, the payment confirmation. A charge for $12,000, split across 4 plane tickets, a suite at the resort, and some VIP package they'd tacked on. And guess whose credit card it was linked to? Mine. My name, my account, right there in the email receipt they'd forwarded to the group. They didn't even try to hide it, just assumed I wouldn't notice or care. I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling the heat rise in my chest. These people had the nerve to book a luxury trip on my dime while they laughed at me behind my back. Before I could even process it, another text popped up, this time just from Derek. Aaron, we pitched in for the trip. You can come if you can afford it. LOL, he wrote. That stupid LOL, like it was all a big joke. I could picture him grinning as he typed it, thinking he was so clever, so above me. Pitched in. They pitched in a damn thing. I checked my bank app right then and there, $12,000. Gone, straight from my account to their little paradise getaway. My coffee mug hit the counter harder than I meant it to, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. Sophia called out from the bathroom. Everything okay? And I forced a yeah, fine, back at her, keeping my voice steady so she wouldn't come out and see my face. They really thought I was broke. They thought I was some chump who couldn't even scrape together a few bucks for a plane ticket, while they sat there planning their dream vacation with my money. I paced the kitchen, my socks sliding on the tile, trying to wrap my head around it. 5 years I'd been paying their way, mortgage, cars, credit cards, everything. And this was how they saw me. A punchline. A guy they could use and mock at the same time. I stopped by the window, looking out at my old sedan parked in the driveway, the one Derek loved to rag on. I could have bought a new car any day I wanted. Hell, I could have bought a whole garage full of them. But I didn't need to prove anything to anybody. Least of all them. But this? Booking a trip on my card, and then texting me like I'm some beggar hoping for a handout? That was a new low, even for them. I leaned against the counter, running a hand through my hair, my mind racing. Sophia didn't know about this yet. She'd been tagged in the chat, but hadn't replied. Maybe she hadn't seen it. Maybe she'd just gone along with it, trusting her family like always. I didn't blame her. She wasn't the one laughing at me, but I couldn't keep letting this slide. I opened my laptop again, pulling up my bank accounts, my credit card statements, everything. I started drafting a plan right there, my fingers moving fast across the keys. Cancel the trip payment? Freeze the cards? Stop the mortgage? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing. They played themselves. They thought they were so smart, so slick, but they just handed me the perfect reason to pull the plug. I wasn't going to let them dance off to the Caribbean on my money while I sat here swallowing their insults. Not anymore. This was my move now, and they were about to find out just how wrong they'd been about me. I was still fuming from that Caribbean trip nonsense when Judith called me the next day, inviting me over for dinner. I'm Aaron, and I've been the secret cash machine for my wife's family for years, but they think I'm a broke joke. After seeing them book a $12,000 vacation on my credit card and then mock me about it, I was already on edge. Sophia answered the phone when Judith rang. She put it on speaker while we were eating breakfast, and I could hear that fake sweetness in her mom's voice right away. Aaron, honey, why don't you come over tonight? We're doing something special for Raymond's birthday, she said, like she actually cared if I was there. Sophia smiled at me across the table, her eyes all hopeful, and I couldn't say no to her. Sure, I muttered, even though every part of me wanted to hang up and never step foot in that house again. I knew better than to trust Judith's act. She didn't want me there because she liked me. She wanted me there to keep up appearances or maybe to dig at me some more. By the time we got to their place that evening, my stomach was already in knots. I drove us over in my old sedan, Sophia chatting about her day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. When we walked in, the smell hit me first: roast beef, garlic, expensive wine. The dining room table was loaded with a spread that could have fed a small army: filet mignon, imported cheeses, a cake with Raymond's name on it, bottles of red wine that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. I knew I'd paid for it all. Every bite, every sip. It was my money, funneled through their credit cards or that mortgage I'd been covering. They didn't know that, of course. They thought they were living off some dead guy's legacy, not me. We sat down, and the night started off quiet enough. Raymond grunted a thanks when I wished him happy birthday. Derek shoveled food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days, and Judith fluttered around, playing the perfect hostess. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table again, her way of keeping me grounded, and I tried to focus on her instead of the clinking glasses and fake smiles. But then Judith leaned across the table, her glass of wine in hand, and fixed me with that crocodile tear look she's so good at. Aaron, sweetheart, she said, her voice all soft and syrupy. I think it's time, Sophia, and you stop relying on us so much. We've carried you for years, you know. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, the piece of steak dangling there. Carried me? Did I hear that right? The room went quiet for a second, like even the air was holding its breath. Derek smirked, popping a piece of cheese in his mouth, and Raymond just stared at his plate, avoiding my eyes. Sophia frowned, looking from her mom to me, but she didn't say anything. I set my fork down slow, real slow, and forced a smile. Carried us, I said, keeping my tone light, like I was just curious. Judith nodded, patting my hand like I was some dumb kid. Oh yes, dear. We've done so much to help you two get by. It's been a burden, but we're family, right? I wanted to laugh right in her face, but I didn't. I just nodded, took a sip of water, and let them go back to their meal. Inside, though, I was boiling. Carried me? I'd paid $112,000 on their mortgage alone, not to mention the cars, the vacations, the credit cards. I'd carried them every step of the way, and here they were, rewriting the story like I was some leech sucking them dry. The rest of the dinner went by in a blur. They laughed, They drank. They toasted to Raymond's health. All while I sat there, smiling on the outside, planning on the inside. I watched Judith cut the cake, her diamond earrings glinting in the light. Earrings I'd probably paid for too. I watched Derek pour another glass of wine, bragging about some new watch he'd bought, and I knew that was my money too. Raymond just ate, quiet as ever. But even he was part of this. They all were. On the drive home, Sophia was quiet, picking up on my mood. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah." I lied, staring at the road. "Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was awake, more awake than I'd been in years. They'd enjoyed their fancy meal, their little party, all on my dime, thinking they were untouchable. They didn't know I was done. Done playing nice, done letting them lie to my face. Their world was about to come crashing down, and I wasn't going to feel one bit sorry when it did. The morning after Raymond's birthday dinner, I woke up with a fire in my gut that wouldn't quit. I'm Aaron, and I've been the hidden wallet for my wife's family for 5 years. But last night, Judith saying they'd carried me, pushed me past my limit. Sophia was still asleep, her hair fanned out on the pillow, no clue what I was about to do. I slid out of bed, grabbed my phone and laptop, and got to work before the sun even peeked through the curtains. By 6 a.m., I'd made my move, and it felt good, damn good. First, I logged into my bank account and canceled the next mortgage payment on Judith and Raymond's house. $2, $300 that wasn't going anywhere near them this month. Then I called the credit card company, the one they'd been using like their personal piggy bank, and froze every single card I'd linked to their names. No more shopping sprees, no more fancy dinners, done. Next, I transferred the car loan payments back to them. 2 shiny SUVs they'd been driving around like they owned the world, now their problem again. Judith's medical insurance? I cut that off too, no more cushy coverage on my dime. And that Caribbean trip they'd booked with my card? I got on the phone with the travel agency, canceled it, and had the $12,000 refunded straight back to me. By 8 a.m., my phone started blowing up, missed calls from Judith, texts from Derek, even a voicemail from Raymond, his voice all shaky. I didn't answer. I just sat there on the couch, sipping my coffee, letting them stew. Sophia was in the kitchen by then, making toast, humming like it was any other day. She didn't know yet, and I wasn't sure how I'd tell her. Then, at 8:30, the banging started, loud, desperate knocks on our front door. I knew who it was before I even got up. I opened it, and there stood Judith, her face red, her eyes wild, still in her bathrobe like she'd run straight from the house. "Aaron, something's wrong with the bank," she yelled, her voice cracking. "Our accounts are locked. The cards aren't working. What's happening?" I leaned against the doorframe, my coffee mug warm in my hand, and looked at her calm as could be. "No, they're just back in your name," I said, taking a slow sip. She blinked at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her hands shaking. I didn't say a word, just reached over to the table by the door, picked up a folder I'd put together last night, and handed it to her. She snatched it, flipped it open, and started leafing through the papers. Receipts, bank statements, every transaction I'd made for them over the years. Mortgage payments, credit card bills, car loan records, medical expenses, vacation deposits, all there in black and white, with my name tied to every single one. "The house. Paid by me," I said, watching her eyes dart over the numbers. "Your car? Me. Derek's tuition? Me. Your whole lifestyle? Me." Her hands started trembling harder, the papers crinkling as she gripped them. You paid for everything?" she whispered, her voice barely there. "Yes," I said, stepping closer so she couldn't miss a word. "But as of today, you're on your own." She stared at me, her face going pale, like all the blood had drained out of her. For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback, no fake smile or sharp jab. She just stood there, clutching that folder, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Behind me, I heard Sophia's footsteps, her soft errand, as she came up to the door. She saw her mom, saw the papers, and frowned. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice quiet. Judith turned to her, eyes pleading. "Sophia, honey, tell him to fix this. There's been a mistake." But I shook my head, cutting her off. "No mistake," I said. "I've been keeping you all afloat for years, and you thank me by laughing in my face. It's over." Judith's mouth tightened, and for a second, I thought she might cry or scream. But she just turned and stumbled back to her car, the folder still in her hands. Sophia looked at me, confused, hurt, but I didn't explain yet. I shut the door, locked it, and went back to my coffee. The calls kept coming. Derek now, then Raymond again, but I ignored them. They'd figure it out soon enough. Their nightmare was just starting, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. Not this time. By noon that day, after I dropped the bomb on Judith, her whole family was in chaos, and I couldn't help but feel a grim kind of satisfaction. I'm Aaron, and I'd just cut off every financial lifeline I'd been giving my wife's family. Mortgage, credit cards, car loans, all of it. After years of them treating me like dirt. Sophia was still at home with me, sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, her face a mix of shock and sadness. She'd heard what I said to her mom at the door, seen the folder of proof, but I hadn't laid it all out for her yet. My phone kept buzzing on the coffee table. Texts, calls, voicemails piling up, but I left it there, letting them panic. I could imagine it clear as day. Judith screaming at some poor bank teller over the phone, her voice shrill as she demanded to know why her cards were dead and the mortgage payment bounced. Raymond, probably pacing their living room, dialing up everybody he had, begging for a loan with that gruff, embarrassed tone he'd never used with me. And Derek. Oh, I bet he was scrambling, posting his precious luxury sneakers on eBay, those ones he'd bragged about at dinner, trying to scrape together cash now that his free ride was over. I checked my accounts earlier. Everything was locked down tight. The $12,000 from their canceled Caribbean trip was already back in my bank, and I'd moved a chunk of my savings to a new account they'd never touch. I wasn't taking chances. Sophia finally broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. Aaron, why didn't you tell me? She asked, looking at me with those big eyes that usually melted me. I set my coffee down, rubbed my hands on my jeans, and turned to face her. Because I loved you enough to help your family, I said, keeping my tone steady. But not enough to let them walk all over me anymore. She didn't say anything right away, just stared at me, her lips pressed tight, like she was trying to piece it all together. I could tell it hurt her, finding out like this, but I wasn't sorry. Not about what I'd done. I didn't want you stuck in the middle. I went on, leaning forward so she'd hear every word. You trusted them, sophomore. You thought they had it all figured out with that inheritance story, and I didn't want to be the one to break that for you. So I kept quiet. Paid their bills, kept their house, their cars, their whole damn life going. And they thanked me by laughing at me, calling me worthless, acting like I was the one leaning on them. Her eyes flicked to the folder on the table, the one I'd given Judith, and she reached for it. I didn't stop her. She flipped it open, her fingers moving slow as she scanned the papers, bank statements, receipts, all the proof of what I'd done for them. This is all you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every bit, I said. Over $300,000 in 5 years. Mortgage, credit cards, Derek's tuition, your mom's doctor bills. That dinner last night. I paid for that too. She shook her head, like she couldn't believe it, and I didn't blame her. It sounded crazy, even to me, saying it out loud. Why'd you let it go so long? She asked, looking up at me, tears starting to shine in her eyes. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. For you? I said simply. I didn't want you to lose them. But last night, when your mom said they'd carried us, that was it. I couldn't take it anymore. She didn't know what to say. I could see it in her face, the way her mouth opened and closed. She put the folder down, hugged her knees to her chest, and just sat there, staring at the floor. My phone buzzed again, another text from Derek. Bro, what's going on? Mom's freaking out, fix this. I almost laughed. Fix it. They'd fixed themselves into this mess, thinking they could use me forever. I didn't reply. Let them figure it out. Sophia finally spoke again, her voice shaky. They're my family, Aaron. What happens to them now? I leaned back, crossing my arms. They're grown-ups, sophomore. They've got a house full of stuff they can sell, jobs they can get. They'll survive. They just won't have me bailing them out anymore. She nodded, slow, like she was still processing it. I could tell she was torn, mad at them, mad at me, scared for what came next. But I'd made my choice. The fallout was theirs to deal with now, and I wasn't going back. A week after I cut off Judith and her crew, their world was falling apart, and I couldn't pretend I didn't feel a twisted kind of relief watching it happen. I'm Aaron, and I'd been propping up my wife's family for years, paying their bills, their mortgage, their fancy lives, while they mocked me like I was some broke loser. But now they were on their own, and it showed. I'd been keeping tabs, not because I cared, but because I wanted to see how far they'd fall without me holding them up. By Monday, their house was listed for sale. Big for sale sign slapped in the front yard, the real estate agent's name plastered across it like a badge of shame. I drove by once, just to see it for myself, and there it was, that oversized place they'd bragged about, now up for grabs because they couldn't pay the mortgage I'd stopped covering. Derek, the golden boy, had to get a job, flipping burgers at some fast food joint downtown. According to a buddy who saw him behind the counter, apron on, no smirk in sight. I almost felt bad for him, but then I remembered how he'd laughed at my car, my clothes, my everything, and the feeling passed. Judith, though, she was the real show. She'd been calling Sophia nonstop, leaving voicemails full of tears and guilt trips, trying to pull her back in. Sophia showed me one. "Honey, we're family. You can't let Aaron do this to us." But Sophia wasn't biting. She'd seen the papers, heard the truth from me, and for the first time, she was seeing her mom's real colors: selfish, manipulative, desperate. That afternoon, Judith showed up at my office unannounced. I work in a quiet little building downtown, crunching numbers for a logistics company. Nothing flashy, but it pays well enough to fund their lives for years. I was at my desk, finishing up some paperwork, when my assistant buzzed me. "There's a woman here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. "She looks upset." I knew it was Judith before she even walked in. The door swung open, and there she was, hair messy, eyes red, no trace of the smug grin she usually wore. Her pride was gone, shattered, and she stood there in a wrinkled coat, clutching her purse like it was all she had left. "Aaron," she started, her voice low and wobbly. "I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was wrong, okay? But we're family. We need your help." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, and just looked at her. She shifted on her feet, waiting for me to say something, but I let the silence stretch out. I could see her squirming, the way her hands tightened on her purse straps. "Please," she whispered finally, barely loud enough to hear. "We're losing everything." I tilted my head, keeping my face calm. "Family," I said, letting the word hang there. "You never considered me family, Judith. I was just a wallet to you. A joke. Remember that toast at your house? Worthless son-in-law. That's what you called me." Her face went red, and she looked down at the floor, like she could hide from the memory. "I didn't mean it," she mumbled. "You know how I am. I say things. Yeah." I cut her off, sitting up straighter. "You say things. And you meant every word. You all did. 5 years I paid for your life, your house, your cars, your vacations, and you thanked me by laughing in my face. So no, I'm not helping you." She stared at me, her mouth trembling, and for a second I thought she'd cry right there. But I didn't flinch. "You'll figure it out," I said, echoing her own words back at her. "Like you told me. I'll always be a worthless son-in-law, right?" Her shoulders slumped, and she didn't have a comeback. She just turned and shuffled out, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat there for a minute, staring at the spot where she'd stood, feeling the weight lift off me. Back home, Sophia was waiting. She'd been quiet all week, wrestling with it all, but she'd stopped taking their calls. "Mom came by your work?" she asked when I walked in, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. "Begged me to fix it." I told her no. Sophia nodded, her eyes steady on mine. "She texted me too," she said. "Said I should make you help them." I didn't reply. I walked over, sat beside her on the couch. "You okay with that?" She took a deep breath, then leaned against me. "They're not who I thought they were," she said. "I'm done bailing them out too." I put my arm around her, feeling the last of the tension ease away. Their world was collapsing. House gone, jobs forced on them, pride in pieces, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. For once, they were facing the mess they'd made, and I was free. A month after I pulled the plug on Judith and her family, the dust was finally settling, and I was ready to close that chapter for good. I'm Aaron, and I'd spent years footing the bill for my wife's folks. Mortgage, cars, vacations, you name it, while they treated me like a nobody. Now, they'd lost it all, and I was done carrying their weight. By now, Raymond and Judith had hit rock bottom. The fancy cars they loved showing off. Repossessed. Towed right out of their driveway while the neighbors watched. I heard from a friend who lived nearby. That Caribbean vacation they'd planned on my dime? Never happened, of course, since I'd canceled it and taken my $12,000 back. Their arrogance, that smug air they'd carried like a crown, gone, stripped away with every bill they couldn't pay. The house sale had gone through too, foreclosed after they missed the mortgage I'd stopped covering, and they were out, living in some cramped rental across town. I didn't feel sorry for them, not even a little. They'd built their lives on lies and my money, and now they were reaping what they'd sown. Meanwhile, I'd been working on something else, something for me and Sophia. For months, I'd been secretly fixing up a new place, a modest house on the edge of town, nothing flashy but ours. I'd kept it quiet, using my savings, the money I hadn't poured into her family, to make it a home. New paint on the walls, a big kitchen for Sophia to cook in, a porch where we could sit and watch the sun go down. I hadn't told her yet, wanting it to be a surprise, a fresh start after all the mess. That morning, I drove her out there, blindfolded her with a scarf, and led her up the steps. "Erin, where are we going?" she laughed, her hands reaching out as I guided her. "Just trust me," I said, grinning as I unlocked the door. When I pulled the scarf off, she blinked, taking it in. The hardwood floors, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the empty rooms waiting for us to fill them. "What is this?" she asked, her voice soft, her eyes wide. "Our new home," I said, watching her face light up. "No more dealing with your family's crap. Just us." She walked around, touching the walls, peeking out the windows, and then turned to me, tears in her eyes but a smile breaking through. "You did this? For us?" I nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah, I've been working on it for a while. Figured we deserved something good after everything." She threw her arms around me, hugging me tight, and I felt the last knot in my chest unravel. Sophia had stood by me through it all. After that day at our old place, when I'd shown Judith the truth and cut them off, she'd made her choice. She'd seen her family for what they were. Users, liars, people who'd taken us both for granted, and she'd cut them off too. No more calls, no more guilt trips. She'd blocked Judith's number, ignored Derek's texts, and when Raymond tried showing up once, she'd told him to leave. It wasn't easy for her, I knew that. They were her blood, her past, and letting go hurt. But she'd done it, and now here we were, starting over. Later that day, we sat on the porch, drinking coffee from a thermos I'd brought, the air cool and quiet around us. "They're really gone, aren't they?" she said, staring out at the yard. "Yeah," I replied, resting my hand on hers. "House is sold, cars are gone, everything. They're on their own now." She nodded, her face calm, but her eyes distant. "I used to think they were invincible," she said. "Mom always acted like she had it all together, like nothing could touch her. And I believed it. She had me," I said, keeping my voice even. "That's why they lasted so long. But I'm not their crutch anymore." Sophia squeezed my hand, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she said. "All those years, the way they treated you, I should have known." "You couldn't have," I told her. "I hid it from you too. Didn't want you to feel like you had to choose." She looked up at me, her eyes steady. "I choose you now," she said, and that was all I needed to hear. We stayed there a while, planning what we'd do with the place, where the couch would go, what color to paint the bedroom. It felt good, normal, like we were finally free. Judith, Raymond, Derek, they were out there somewhere, scrambling to survive, but they didn't matter anymore. This was our life, our home, and they had no place in it. The last goodbye wasn't just to them. It was to the old me, the guy who'd let them walk all over him. That Erin was gone too. It was a quiet evening, a couple months after we'd moved into our new house, when I drove past Judith and Raymond's old place one last time. I'm Erin, and I'd spent years bankrolling my wife's family, paying their mortgage, their bills, their whole fancy life, while they laughed at me like I was nothing. Now, that life was gone, and I was finally free of them. Sophia was at home, unpacking the last of our boxes, humming to herself like she'd been doing more and more lately. She was lighter now, happier, and so was I. But I'd had this itch to see their old house again, to close the book on it all, so I took the long way back from work and found myself on their street. The place was empty, foreclosed, a shell of what it used to be. The big windows were dark, the lawn overgrown, and a faded sold sticker was peeling off the real estate sign out front. I slowed my old sedan, the one they'd mocked 100 times, and spotted Judith and Raymond in the driveway, loading boxes into a beat-up truck I didn't recognize. Their fancy SUVs were long gone, repossessed weeks ago, and this rusty thing must have been all they could afford now. Judith's hair was tied back, messy, her face tired and lined. Raymond moved slow, his shoulders hunched, lifting a box like it weighed a ton. They looked smaller, broken, nothing like the proud, loud people who'd toasted to my worthlessness in a house I'd paid for. I pulled over across the street, just watching for a minute. They didn't notice me at first, too busy arguing over how to fit the boxes in the truck. Judith's voice carried, sharp but weaker than I remembered, nagging Raymond about something he'd packed wrong. He grunted back, barely looking at her, and I could see the defeat in him. Derek wasn't there, probably at his burger job or crashing with some friend he'd conned into taking him in. Their world had shrunk to this: a rented truck, a pile of junk, and no one to bail them out. I thought about everything they'd lost because of me, or really, because of themselves. The house, gone to the bank after I stopped the mortgage payments. The cars, towed away when the loans I'd covered went back to them. That Caribbean trip, canceled with my money refunded to me. Their pride, their swagger, all those years of looking down on me. It was dust now, scattered in the mess they'd made. I didn't feel bad. Not after the way they'd treated me. Not after the lies they'd fed Sophia. Not after they'd taken every dime I gave and thrown it back in my face with a laugh. They saw me then. Judith first, her eyes narrowing as she straightened up. Then Raymond, turning slow to follow her gaze. I rolled down my window, letting the cool air hit my face, and met their stares. They didn't say anything, just stood there, frozen, their faces a mix of shame and something else. Anger, maybe, or disbelief. I could have kept quiet, could have driven off and left them to their misery, but I didn't. I leaned out a little, resting my arm on the door, and gave them a small nod. "Run's perfect," I said, patting the side of my sedan, my voice steady and clear. Their mouths tightened, Judith's into a thin line, Raymond's into a grimace, but they didn't reply. What could they say? They knew now. Knew I'd been the one keeping them afloat. Knew I'd pulled the plug, knew I was done. I didn't need to rub it in any more than that. I put the car in gear, gave them one last look, and drove away, the engine humming smooth under me. In the rear view, I saw them standing there, watching me go, but I didn't look back again. That was it. The last tie severed, the final goodbye. As I turned onto the main road, a smile crept onto my face, small at first, then bigger. I felt light, like a weight I'd carried for years had finally lifted. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink, and I cranked the radio up, some old rock song filling the car. I thought about Sophia waiting at home, our new place, the life we were building. She'd chosen me, stuck by me, and we were good, better than good. Judith and Raymond could pack their boxes, scramble to survive, but they didn't matter anymore. They'd mocked me in a house I'd paid for, toasted my worthlessness with wine I'd bought, and now they were nothing but a memory fading in my dust. I drove on, the road stretching out ahead, and smiled the whole way home. Free, finally, completely free.